It was a soft, unfamiliar silence that woke him. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that lives in places where worry has never stayed long. Thomas Reed opened his eyes slowly.
For a moment, he didn't move.
The ceiling above him was high and white, framed by long curtains that filtered in a pale morning light. The sheets were smooth, tucked neatly around him, not like the worn blankets he was used to back home.
He turned his head. And then, he froze.
Sitting beside him, calm and composed, was a woman he had never expected to see so close. She wore a deep red silk blouse, her blonde hair resting gently over her shoulders. Her posture was straight, but not cold. In her hand, a single sheet of paper.
Thomas blinked. Once, twice.
"Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice still rough from sleep, I think there's been some kind of mistake." The woman looked at him with steady, thoughtful eyes.
"No mistake," she said softly.
"My name is Margaret Collins." She paused, as if giving him time to catch up. "And we were married yesterday." The words didn't land all at once. They settled slowly, like dust in an old room. Thomas sat up quickly, pulling the sheet closer around him, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. That can't be right," he said gently, almost apologetically. "I would remember something like that." Margaret didn't argue. She simply extended the paper toward him.
"Take your time," she said. Thomas hesitated, then reached for it.
It was a marriage certificate.
Signed. Dated. Real.
He stared at his name for a long moment. And then, almost without thinking, he looked down at his hand.
A ring. Simple. Gold. Honest.
He let out a slow breath. "Well," he said quietly, a faint weary smile forming, "that's certainly something." Margaret's expression softened just a little.
"Yes," she replied. "It is."
There was no tension in the room. Only a quiet kind of confusion. The kind that doesn't demand answers right away.
After a moment, Thomas looked up again.
"I don't mean to be rude," he said, choosing his words carefully, "but why would someone like you marry someone like me?" Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "Because," she said gently, "you asked me to." That surprised him more than anything else.
"I did." She nodded.
"You told me about your daughter." At that, something changed in Thomas's face. His shoulders dropped slightly. His voice, when it came, was softer.
"Emily," he said. Margaret nodded again. "Yes. Emily."
For a moment, neither of them spoke. The name itself carried weight, memories. Long nights in hospital waiting rooms, quiet prayers whispered into folded hands, and the steady ache of not having enough. "She likes sunflowers," Thomas said after a while, almost to himself. "Always said they looked like little suns trying their best." Margaret listened. Not as a businesswoman, but as someone who understood the value of a small, bright thing. "You told me she needs treatment," she said carefully. "Something beyond what you could manage alone."
Thomas gave a small, honest nod.
"I've been doing what I can," he said. "Working, saving, hoping." He smiled faintly. "You know how it is. Life doesn't always move as fast as we need it to." Margaret's gaze lowered for a moment.
"Yes," she said. "I do." There was a pause. A gentle one. Then she looked back at him. "This arrangement," she said, her tone steady but kind, "was meant to help both of us. No pressure. No expectations. Just a way forward." Thomas studied her for a moment. There was something about her that didn't match the stories people told about powerful individuals. She didn't seem distant. She seemed thoughtful. "I don't have much to offer," he said quietly. "Just honesty, and a promise to do right by the people in my life." Margaret gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Sometimes," she said, "that's more than enough." The room felt warmer somehow. Less like a place he didn't belong, and more like a beginning he hadn't expected. After a while, Thomas swung his legs gently over the side of the bed. "I suppose," he said with a soft chuckle, "life has a funny way of surprising us." Margaret stood as well, smoothing the sleeve of her blouse. "Yes," she replied. "It does." Then she paused, just briefly. "Would you like to see Emily?" she asked. Thomas looked up quickly. There it was. Not a transaction. Not an obligation. Just kindness. His eyes softened. "Yes," he said. "I would." And as they walked toward the door together, two people from very different worlds, moving at the same quiet pace, there was a feeling neither of them spoke about. Not love. Not yet. But something steady. Something patient.
Something that grows slowly, like trust. And sometimes, in life, those are the things that last the longest. The hospital smelled the same as always. Clean, quiet, and filled with waiting. Thomas walked slowly beside Margaret, his hands folded together, as if holding onto something fragile. The polished floors reflected soft light, and somewhere in the distance, a machine beeped in a steady rhythm.
Room 214. He paused at the door. For just a moment. Then he opened it.
"Daddy?" Emily's small voice filled the room. She was sitting up in bed, her thin hands wrapped around a stuffed bear. Her face lit up the second she saw him. And in that instant, nothing else mattered. Thomas walked over quickly, his voice warm. "Hey there, sunshine," he said softly. Emily smiled, but then her eyes shifted.
Toward Margaret.
She studied her quietly, with the honest curiosity only children have.
"Who is she?" Emily asked. Thomas hesitated.
But Margaret stepped forward gently. "My name is Margaret," she said, her voice calm and kind.
"I'm a friend." Emily tilted her head. Then, after a moment, she smiled.
"You look like someone who brings good things," she said.
The room fell still. Margaret blinked. Just once.
And something inside her softened. She moved a little closer, carefully. "I brought you something," she said, placing a small bouquet beside the bed.
Sunflowers. Bright. Warm. Full of life.
Emily gasped softly. "My favorite."
Thomas looked at Margaret. Really looked this time. And he understood.
Not everything needed to be explained. Some things were simply felt.
Days passed.
Quietly. Margaret didn't just arrange doctors and treatment.
She stayed.
She listened to Emily's stories, laughed at her little jokes, sat beside her during the long afternoons when the world felt too still.
And Thomas watched it all. Not with suspicion, but with something deeper.
Gratitude. One evening, as the sun began to set beyond the hospital window, Emily drifted to sleep, her hand resting gently in Margaret's.
Thomas stood nearby.
"You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. Margaret didn't look away from Emily. "Yes," she replied softly.
"I did."
There was no pride in her voice.
Only truth. Thomas nodded slowly.
"You know," he said, "people spend their whole lives looking for something real." Margaret glanced at him. "And sometimes," he continued, "it shows up when they've already given up looking." Margaret's eyes softened. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. Just a feeling. And that was enough.
Final moment.
Weeks later, Emily stood outside the hospital doors. Stronger. Smiling.
Holding both their hands. "Are we going home?" she asked. Thomas looked at Margaret.
Margaret looked at Emily. And then gently,
she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Home. Not a place.
But something they had quietly become.
Together.